February 27, 2026, 2:40 a.m. Western Iraq, Anbar Province Desert. Coordinates 33 degrees 47 minutes north, 41 degrees 36 minutes east. At the time, I was a sniper with Charlie Company, 1st Reconnaissance Battalion U.S. Marine Corps, attached to the Joint Task Force for Operation Epic Fury. Our mission was to conduct area denial from a temporary outpost codenamed Outpost Zero, cutting off supply lines for militants infiltrating from Syria. By that hour, I had already been on night watch for 4 straight hours. Through the night vision device, everything was an endless green. Even the wind-carved ripples in the dunes were crystal clear. My spotter, Thompson, was crouched about 3 meters to my left, scanning the dry wadi to the north with a thermal scope. Every 15 minutes, the radio carried a sitrep confirmation from company command. Everything was within standard operating procedure. Then Thompson's voice came over the throat mic, suddenly low, not the controlled low of tactical comms, but the kind of low you get when something is squeezing your throat. He said, "Sergeant, I've got a signal on thermal, but I can't see a body." I asked what he meant. He said the signal was strong, shaped roughly like a human, or maybe like a standing hyena, but it wasn't visible in the optical field. Nothing to the naked eye, nothing through the PVS-14, only on thermal. I swung my own thermal over. At the entrance of the northern wadi, about 120 meters out, a humanoid outline with a faint cold blue glow was standing beside an eroded rock. It wasn't moving. No heat fluctuation from breathing. The torso read as perfectly uniform temperature, like a rock face. But at the head, there were 2 faint points of light, not heat sources, but something actively emitting a cold glow. My first thought was equipment malfunction. On deployment, night vision and thermals glitch all the time. Sand, bad battery contacts, condensation, anything can create artifacts. I tapped Thompson on the shoulder to steady him, switched channels, and sent a standard report to command. Thermal anomaly north of Outpost Zero. Request confirmation of any friendly units operating in the wadi. The reply came back fast and clean. Negative. No friendlies in the area. Airspace clear of drones. The nearest patrol was 7 kilometers to our southeast. When I looked back at the thermal, the figure was gone from where it had been. It had moved to about 60 meters east of us. From 120 meters to 60, across open gravel with no cover, no terrain folds for concealment. A grown man sprinting flat out would need at least 6 or 7 seconds to cross that distance. It had taken less than 3, and I hadn't seen it move. One frame it was by the rock. The next frame, it was 60 meters closer. What chilled me more was the angle. It was now facing us. Thompson started reciting a prayer, his voice breaking, like it was being squeezed out of him. I didn't stop him, because my hands were shaking too. Not fear, at least that's what I told myself then. It was something more primitive, something hardwired deep in the genome, telling you, whatever you're looking at should not exist. It's not a threat, not an enemy, not something you can process through rules of engagement. It's a denial of your entire framework of reality. I'd been in the Marine Corps 12 years. Afghanistan, Syria. I'd seen ambushes, IED aftermaths, human bodies torn apart, people breaking under extreme stress. I can say this with certainty. No fear compares to what I felt that night. Bullets, bombs, ambushes, you understand those. You can respond with tactics, training, muscle memory. But when something is outside your comprehension, all of that collapses in an instant. You revert to something primitive. A human in the dark facing the unknown. I forced myself to look away from the thermal and use my naked eyes. Nothing. The desert night was clear enough that starlight outlined the horizon. The gravel field was empty. No movement, not even an extra rock out of place. Through the PVS-14, same thing. Nothing. But when I went back to thermal, it was still there. Closer now. 40 meters. Its shape started to change. At first it was humanoid. Now the torso was elongating, with additional protrusions above the shoulders, like extra heads or limbs unfolding from inside its body cavity. The thermal readings began to fluctuate violently, jumping from uniform cold blue to orange-red, then snapping back to blue, like a rapid, labored breath. That's when I heard it. Not from outside, not through the air. It was inside my skull, a low-frequency presence, somewhere between vibration and tinnitus, probably below 20 hertz. Beneath the theoretical threshold of human hearing. But you could feel it, like a hand squeezing your brainstem. Thompson later said he heard something like fingernails on a chalkboard, but with no sense of direction, no up, down, left, or right. The thing stopped at 40 meters. On thermal, those protrusions began pulsing rhythmically, like the gill slits of some deep-sea creature. Then I noticed something I still can't forget. It was cooling the ground around it. On the thermal display, centered on the figure, a low-temperature zone about 5 meters in radius was forming. Desert nights are already cold, but this was different. The surface temperature of the rocks dropped from about 3 degrees Celsius to well below freezing, down into the teens below zero. I made a decision. I switched off the safety and aimed through the PVS-14 at empty ground. I couldn't see it, but I knew exactly where it was from the thermal. I fired a tracer round, not to kill it. I didn't know how you'd even begin to kill something you couldn't see, but to confirm point of impact. The 5.56 tracer cut a green arc through the air, passed straight through the area, struck the gravel beyond, bounced, and went dark. In that instant, the figure on thermal contracted sharply, like a jellyfish reacting to touch. Then it blurred, its edges dissolving, the heat signature collapsing. Within 3 seconds it was gone. Thompson asked if I'd hit it. I said I didn't know. I still don't. The bullet showed no deflection. It was like it passed through empty air. The thermal was clean again. The cold zone faded, the ground temperature returning to normal nighttime levels. On the radio, Command asked us to confirm tracer fire from Outpost 0 and report status. I replied accidental discharge, training cancelled, awaiting further instructions. I didn't report what we saw. Neither did Thompson. We compared notes later and agreed to bury it. Simple reason, I didn't want to be tagged with combat stress reaction, didn't want a psych eval, didn't want complications before a promotion board. The Marine Corps doesn't keep crazy people. You can lose a leg, an eye, those are honorable scars. But if you say you saw something that doesn't exist, you become a liability. Something to be removed. But it did exist. I'm certain of that. Not because I saw it. Night vision, thermal, even your eyes can lie. I believe it was real because of the sound. That low-frequency vibration inside the skull. Hallucinations can make you see things, hear things. But they don't make your teeth vibrate, don't make your organs resonate. That was the closest I came to breaking during Operation Epic Fury. But it wasn't the last time. 3 days later, on March 1st, our company redeployed to a forward operating base codenamed Chrome, to support a sweep with the Army's 75th Ranger Regiment. The base itself had a story. It was built on a leveled ridgeline overlooking an ancient dry riverbed. When the engineers cleared the ground, they dug up pottery shards and bones. The embedded archaeological liaison said the finds were at least 2,000 years old, possibly linked to some Parthian-era ritual site. None of us paid it much attention. In Iraq, history is everywhere. Every shovel hits a few thousand years. To us, it was just background noise. That evening, I was on first watch in the observation tower on the eastern side of the base. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, and the western sky was a sickly orange-red, the kind that usually means a sandstorm is coming. I set up my M110 sniper rifle, adjusted the white balance on my night vision, and began scanning the southeastern horizon. About 40 minutes after sunset, with only the last trace of deep blue twilight left, my NVGs picked up an abnormal reflection. Southeast, roughly 400 meters out, across the dry riverbed, there was a line of low hills. Along the ridgeline, several irregular points of light appeared. Not the warm yellow of artificial sources. These were a cold bluish glow like phosphorescence, but much brighter, and with a clear directional quality. I increased the gain on the NVGs, and the lights sharpened. 7 of them, arranged in a slightly curved arc roughly the same height, roughly even spacing. They weren't static. They moved, very slowly, like something suspended and drifting with the air. I raised the laser rangefinder and lased the area. The display read 402 meters steady, but the instant the laser fired, all 7 lights went out at once. Not fading, just gone. Simultaneous. Like someone flipped the same switch on all of them. I reported it to the TOC. The response, possibly an infiltrating unit using IR beacons. They'd send an MQ-9 Reaper to scan the area. The Reaper arrived 15 minutes later and ran a full sweep of the Wadi with its EOS/IR package for 20 minutes. Result, nothing. No heat signatures, no movement, not even a desert fox. The duty officer came over the radio in a flat voice and said it was likely atmospheric refraction causing anomalous starlight. No cause for concern. anomalous starlight. In Army and Marine Corps manuals, that phrase is about the same as a doctor telling you it's probably just a tension headache. What it really means is, we know you saw something, but it's not worth allocating more resources. So get back to your post and keep watching until the next anomaly shows up, and we'll label that one with another harmless term. I didn't argue. Not because I believed it, but because I noticed something. After the lights went out, the entire southeastern horizon looked off. It's hard to describe. Like staring into a mirror for a long time and suddenly realizing the room behind you in the reflection isn't exactly the same as the room you're in. The folds in the curtains are wrong. A chair has shifted a few inches. There's an extra shadow on the wall. I lowered the NVGs and looked with my naked eyes. Nothing, just a normal desert night. I brought the NVGs back up, and that wrongness returned. The air in that direction seemed denser than the surrounding air, dense enough to subtly warp the starlight. Like a massive, perfectly transparent convex lens sitting between me and the hills. I didn't report it again. There were no friendlies, no civilians in that area, and under ROE I couldn't just open fire without confirmed hostile intent. So I kept watching. I switched the NVGs to low light mode, cranked my scope to max magnification, and swept the hills inch by inch. In the middle of the ridge, beneath a protruding rock shelf, I saw a crack, or more precisely, an opening. In the green field of the NVGs, it was a void, absolute black, like light itself was falling into ink. I checked the bearing. That opening sat almost exactly at the center point of where those 7 lights had formed their arc. I logged the coordinates. Then I made a decision that, in hindsight, was incredibly stupid. I reported it to Lieutenant Harris, our platoon leader. Harris was a textbook infantry officer, West Point graduate, 3 years building his command record before rotating stateside for grad school. He had an instinctive dislike for anything outside the norm, because the abnormal disrupts plans, and plans were how he proved his competence. After hearing me out, he said, in a controlled tone, that the morning sweep would cover that area, and the ground team could take a look. The next morning, March 2nd, 0730, the operation kicked off. A Ranger platoon took the lead, pushing northwest from the eastern side of the wadi. Our recon platoon provided overwatch and observation from high ground to the west. The first 2 hours were uneventful. The Rangers cleared 3 abandoned bunkers, found a few weapons caches, and met only light resistance, sporadic small arms fire. As the sun rose, the temperature climbed fast, and heat shimmer began to distort the distance. Around 1000, one of the Ranger fire teams reached the hill. Their team leader reported over the joint channel that the opening was real, about 1.5 meters wide, 1.2 meters high, requiring a crouch to enter. The stone around it showed tool marks, heavily weathered, clearly ancient. They asked for permission to enter and clear. Harris checked his watch, then the map. Per the plan, the sweep had to conclude by 1400 so units could exfil within the safety window. Entering an unknown cave system would take time and carried ambush risk. But SOP also dictated that any structure capable of concealing weapons or personnel had to be cleared. He hesitated for about 30 seconds. Then he ordered the team to deploy a fiber optic camera at the entrance. Take a look first, decide after. The combat engineer had the camera set in under 30 seconds. The feed came back to our tactical terminal. I crouched behind a rock with Harris, both of us staring at a 6-inch screen. The camera's LED lit up the tunnel. The walls were indeed carved by hand. Rough, consistent tool marks, like something patient had hollowed a throat through stone with the simplest tools. The passage sloped downward at about 15 degrees. After 10 meters, it opened into a larger chamber. The camera advanced. The LED swept across the floor, walls, ceiling. The floor was level, paved with stone slabs. The walls were covered in carvings, dense, continuous, from floor to ceiling. You couldn't make out the details on the feed, but the sheer density of the lines, the relentless, almost pathological repetition, it made me think of a single word, delirium. This wasn't carving meant to communicate. It was something being poured out, uncontrollably. Then the camera turned toward the center of the chamber. There was a stone standing there, about 2 meters tall, half a meter wide, unworked, still in the raw shape it had when it was split from the mountain. Its surface was coated in something dark, like dried liquid, or some oxidized layer that had been there for thousands of years. And in the center of that stone, embedded in it, was something. A transparent, humanoid outline, like an insect trapped in amber, or a human form carved from pure quartz, but the proportions were wrong. Limbs too long, torso too flat. The head wasn't a sphere, but elongated, almost triangular. It was curled inward, arms wrapped around its knees, like a fetus in the womb. But what made my scalp go cold? Its head was slowly turning. The moment the feed came through, Harris's hand froze on the terminal. Over the radio, the fire team leader asked, "Sir, do you see that? What the hell is that?" No one answered. The feed continued. The head of the transparent figure turned about 15 degrees, then stopped. Under the LED light, a faint refractive sheen spread across its surface, like oil blooming on water. 2 points of light, cold blue, lit up deep where its head should be. The fiber optic camera feed cut out. Not static, not signal loss, not a dead black screen. It was something I had never seen before. The image on the display turned into a perfect mirror, reflecting our own faces. Mine and Lieutenant Harris's, crammed into that 6-inch screen, washed pale by the LED light, eyes locked on ourselves. It lasted 3 seconds. Then the screen went completely black. Harris looked up at me. His lips moved, but no sound came out. Then he keyed the radio, his voice the most unstable I'd ever heard, still trying to hold on to command authority, but barely. "All units, withdraw from the hill immediately. Repeat, immediate withdrawal. You are authorized to use any means necessary to break contact." The fire team pulled back from the hill. No contact, no shots fired. But they came off that slope faster than anything I'd ever seen in training. The team leader, a veteran with 6 deployments between Afghanistan and Iraq, made it back to the safe zone, didn't report, didn't debrief. He just took off his helmet, crouched beside a Humvee tire, buried his face in his hands, and stayed like that for about 10 minutes. I went over, crouched next to him, handed him a bottle of water. He took it, didn't drink, just held it. After a long time, he said one sentence. It was talking in my head. I didn't ask what it said. I already knew. That night at Outpost Zero, the unseen thing had left that low-frequency vibration inside my skull. It was speaking too. I refused to understand it, refused to accept that those frequencies carried meaning. Because if I did, it meant my mind was no longer private. It was a channel that could be opened at any time. But this time, on that hill, whatever it was didn't just send back an image through the fiber optic camera. It sent presence. It made us see ourselves. It made us realize, while we were observing it, it was observing us. Or worse, it had always been observing us. Since the first day we stepped into that desert. Since the engineers broke ground. Since the first soldier rubbed his eyes on night watch and looked out at the horizon. It had been there. Quiet. Patient. Watching in a way completely outside our understanding. That afternoon, the operation was officially declared complete. The report reduced the hill to a single line. Unit encountered unidentified cave structure. Assessed as no tactical value. Coordinates logged for follow-up. That follow-up never happened. Not during my deployment, at least. There were rumors. A team outside the normal chain of command arrived at FOB Chrome a few days later. Plainclothes. IDs marked with an agency none of us recognized. They took all the camera data, and the full personnel records of that fire team. Then they disappeared, like they'd never been there. Those were the 2 encounters I personally witnessed. But the moment I knew something had been permanently broken, that came the 3rd time. It happened during my last week in theater. And this time, it wasn't just individual. March 10th, night. A sudden sandstorm swept across western Anbar. Winds hit 80 kilometers per hour. Visibility dropped below 3 meters. All air support was cancelled. Drones were recalled. The base went to maximum severe weather alert. All personnel were ordered to remain under cover unless on essential watch. FOB Chrome was laid out as an irregular quadrilateral, surrounded by HESCO barriers stacked into walls, with watchtowers at each corner. Inside, everything was prefab structures powered by diesel generators. Within the first hour of the storm, the generators choked on sand twice, then failed completely. The base went dark, total blackout. Only chem lights remained, glowing faint green through the dust like something out of a ghost story. I was in Barracks 3 with 7 other Marines. Sand hammered against the metal walls, a constant scraping like fingernails on a chalkboard. We sat around a folding table, seams taped, but fine dust still seeped in, forming a thin yellow haze in the air. Around midnight the wind dropped for a few minutes. In that brief quiet, we heard something. Not the wind, not generators restarting. A low, sustained tone coming from beyond the perimeter. No variation. No breaks. like a massive pipe organ holding its lowest note. But an organ moves air. This didn't feel like air. It came through the ground, through the wire mesh of the HESCO barriers, through the concrete under our boots, through our bones. The water cup on the table was vibrating, not rippling, sliding microscopically across the surface. I pressed my hand on it and felt the tremor in my palm. Then the tower guard came over the radio, voice breaking through the interference. He said there was movement outside the perimeter, out in the sand. A lot of movement. Shapes unclear, but moving. Everyone in the barracks stood up at once. We grabbed weapons, pulled on NVGs, pushed out into the storm. Night vision was useless. The dust reflected the IR illumination back into the lenses, turning everything into a white wall of noise. We switched to thermal, and thermal confirmed it. Along the outside of the HESCO barriers, stretching across the entire western and northern perimeter, there were rows of cold blue silhouettes, packed tight, less than a meter apart, extending from the base of the wall out into the storm, beyond the effective range of the thermal. Roughly humanoid, but the heads wrong, elongated, split, missing entirely, torsos connecting straight into limbs, and they were all doing the same thing, moving, but not moving position, swaying, slowly, in ways that didn't match any joint structure, like seaweed, like deep-sea tendrils drifting in current. 8 of us stood there at the barracks entrance, watching them sway on thermal for about 5 minutes. No one spoke. Not because of discipline, because language itself had shut down. You stand there with a rifle that can put 30 rounds out in a second, grenades on your belt that can crack open light armor, thinking you're one of the most dangerous predators on the planet. And then you see them. And you realize everything you have, your weapons, your training, your entire framework of violence, might be as meaningless as an ant raising its mandibles at a descending boot. Because they weren't attacking us. Not in any way we understand. After 5 minutes, they all turned. At the exact same moment, same angular speed, hundreds of them, all pivoting inward, facing the base, facing us. Then they started to brighten. Cold blue shifted to green, yellow, orange, then blinding white on the thermal. Their temperature was spiking. The ground temperature was rising with them. The wire mesh in the HESCO barriers began to emit a sharp metallic expansion whine. The sand packed inside started venting heat, like the entire wall was about to ignite from within. The base commander came over the radio. His voice, I'd never heard anything like it. Not fear. Fear is still something. This was empty. Like whatever made him a person had been scooped out, and only muscle memory was left to move his vocal cords. All units, execute emergency evacuation protocol. Abandon non-essential equipment. Move to rally point. Repeat. Abandon non-essential equipment. We ran. Not a tactical withdrawal. Not bounding Overwatch. None of the controlled disengagements we trained for. We just ran. 8 of us, sprinting blind through a sandstorm, navigating off GPS watches toward the rally point. I dropped my thermal. Thompson picked it up later. But I looked back once while running. I didn't see anything. The storm was too thick. But I felt it. A wave of heat rolling in from the perimeter. Dry. Carrying the smell of metal and ozone. It cut through my combat uniform, through the undershirt, straight onto my skin, like a massive, burning hand pressing against my back. We made it to the rally point. 2 Black Hawks were on the ground, delayed by the storm, rotors already spinning. When the pilots saw us, the look on their faces, I had never seen that expression on aviators before. It wasn't concern, not tension. It was pure, unfiltered urgency to get the hell out of there. We climbed aboard the helicopter. The doors weren't even fully shut before the Black Hawk lifted off. I leaned against the cabin wall and looked out the window toward FOB Chrome. For a brief moment, the storm opened up, a pocket where visibility snapped back to maybe 200 meters. Above the base, there was a column of light. Not something projecting upward from the ground. This was the opposite. It was descending from a fixed point in the night sky, a beam about 50 meters in diameter. The color was something between violet and ultraviolet, a shade I can't name. It enveloped the entire base, its edges so clean they looked cut with a ruler. Inside that column, the air was burning. Not metaphorically, actual, visible plasma, crawling along the wire mesh of the HESCO barriers, climbing the metal frames of the prefab buildings, spiraling up the steel supports of the watchtowers. But there were no explosions, no smoke, none of the chaos you associate with fire. It was quiet, controlled, like watching combustion under a microscope. The Black Hawk banked, and the base slipped out of view. When it came back into sight, the column was gone. The flames were gone. The base was still there, intact. On thermal, the hundreds of silhouettes had vanished. Nothing remained in the storm. After we landed at Al Asad Air Base, we were taken to an isolation briefing room. Everyone was required to file a detailed incident report, then undergo individual questioning. Some of the interviewers were military. Some were in civilian clothes. There was also a woman who never said a word the entire time, just sat in the corner, typing into an unmarked laptop. I described everything I had seen. The man questioning me nodded. He didn't press for details. Didn't challenge anything. That, by itself, told me something. It wasn't that he didn't believe me. He already knew. He was just checking whether my account matched what they already had. 72 hours later, my deployment was terminated early. I was put on AC-130 with a load of cargo and flown back to the States. At Camp Pendleton, an administrative officer I'd never met handed me a document stating my deployment record had been reclassified as involving sensitive information. Under the cited provisions, I was prohibited from disclosing any unusual experiences from the deployment without authorization. I signed. We all did. That's what happened to me and the men I served with during Operation Epic Fury in 2026. I won't tell you what those things are. I don't know. I won't tell you whether they're friend or enemy. That kind of binary doesn't apply. I won't even tell you whether they were real or some kind of shared hallucination, because over those 3 nights, the line between real and unreal stopped meaning anything to me. I only know one thing. Beneath the deserts of Anbar, there's more buried than oil and ancient pottery. We've always assumed we were the only predators out there with language, tools, and tactics. We were wrong. We're just the loudest. And deeper down, far older than anything from the Parthian Empire, there are things that have been waiting. Not for a specific year, not for a political shift, not for a war. They're waiting for us to get close enough for them to reach out and touch our faces. So the next time you're alone, late at night, lights off, lying in total darkness, you can try this. Feel the air around you. See if it suddenly feels just a little thicker. Feel your teeth. See if there's a faint numbness. Listen inside your skull. See if there's a low-frequency vibration you only just noticed. That's not tinnitus. That's them learning your frequency. And you're standing on the north bank of a dry riverbed, staring through a night vision device into an endless green horizon, while on thermal, something that shouldn't exist has just turned to face you. You're looking at it. It's looking at you. So now there's only one question left. When those cold blue lights, what command would call, anomalous starlight, appear on the horizon again, will you log it in the last line of your sitrep and turn the page for your night watch pay? Or will you crouch down, press your eye to the rangefinder, and hit the button, sending an invisible beam of laser light into that dense air? What happens the moment that beam touches it? That night I didn't press it. Thompson didn't. Lieutenant Harris didn't. The fire team leader didn't. No one at FOB Chrome did. But someone will. One day somewhere, a finger will press that button, out of curiosity, fear, or something they can't even name. And when that happens, that violet column won't just hang over a place like FOB Chrome. It'll come down somewhere else. Closer. Maybe, right outside your window.